Okay, so the information states there that Stella decides to crochet baby shoes to sell online. Startup costs include the buying of crochet needles, pattern templates, and creating an advertising pamphlet. Crochet is a process of creating textiles by using a crochet hook to interlock loops of yarn. Okay, now they asked us to refer to Annex A, which shows the graphs marked X and Y representing the business performance for the first 20 years of shoes made. Okay, so we have on the right hand side we have the Annex A presented to you, as you can see it, and we're going to refer to this when answering the questions. So usually you will find this in an addendum. It's an additional set of pages for your paper, and all this annexures will be in the addendum. Okay, so let's look at 1.3.1. Write down the value of the startup costs. So startup costs are mentioned at the top, and if you look at the top, it mentions here that it is the buying of, it's this line here, the second line, where it's the buying of the needles, etc., and the pattern templates and advertising pamphlets. So there is a cost incurred then in order to start a business. So remember, there's no information given on this question, but we go to the annexure, and we know that you need money right at the outset. That means we have to spend some money. So obviously, by looking at the graph, there's graph X and Y. There's no income and expenditure explained. So we know that we need to have money right at the 0 point. That means we need to actually have money and spend that money. So that becomes our start-off cost. Now if you look at it, the lines in between the 200 and the 300, right? If you count those lines, you'll notice it's in tens, and all the way right to the arrow we have pointed, you'll notice that that arrow is indicating it starts at 7 on that line. So from 200 to 300 is basically in tens. So at the 7th line we have the amount of 270. So 1.3.2, state which graph X or Y represents the income graph. Now remember, I've just mentioned that money that is spent at the outset is our expense and startup cost. So looking at the 0, that would be no sales would have been made for that item. So if you look at the graph, it would be this area here, and it would be this graph here, which is graph X. So your answer would be graph X. Okay, 1.3.3, calculate the selling price of a pair of shoes. So in order to find the selling price, we know the selling price affects the income. So let's look at the income line, which we've indicated as graph X, and let's look for a point that indicates to us a fairly even number. By this I mean, if you look at the 600 right over here, you'll find that it's quite clear that it's on 600. So I can use that number in order to do my calculations, and I notice that if I come all the way right down here, the 600 as 10 pairs. So I can use this calculation in order to find out the price of one pair. So if 600 Rand is for 10 pairs, so I divide it, then I know that one pair will cost 60 Rand. Okay, 6 pairs of shoes must be sold to break even. Explain the meaning of the word break even. So if we look at the graph, we find 6 pairs of shoes, right, and directly above that we find this intersection here. That intersection means break even. It is when the income is equal to the expense at that point where they intersect, and also you'll notice that there is no profit or loss made at that point. So the break even is when the cost price, right, equals the selling price, or we could say the income equals the expense, right, and at this point no profit or loss is made.